Good morning, YouTube. So in this video I wanted to take a look at how I got started geocaching. So in 2001 I bought a Garmin StreetPilot-III to use in my Toyota 4Runner. This happened to be a trip I took in 2004, and this is in central Nevada. And what I used to do at the time was I would go to the geocaching web page. I would copy and paste the latitude and longitude into the Garmin mapping program, then upload that waypoint to the GPS. So then I would use that waypoint and navigate to it and drive my truck up. Here I was on a gravel road, and you drive until you hit the minimum distance to the geocache. And this one, the name of the cache was called Quaking Marks the Spot, and there's some quaking aspen trees. That's a pretty good clue, and the GPS told me it was this direction, and I hiked up to that grove of trees. Here's my StreetPilot-III. It was one of the first GPS units that had a color display. It was a little bit bulky for hand use. This thing weighed over a pound, and you know, it's not like your pocket GPS. This was a pretty big unit. Took 6 AA batteries to run it, and it had an external antenna, and you had a 128 megabyte memory card that you could put in there for all the maps and everything. But you can see here I had the waypoint, and there's the coordinates, and it took me right to this ammo can that was the geocache buried under some branches and leaves and stuff. And then what I would do is I would print out the geocache description from the web page. Again, this was in 2004. There were no smartphones back then. There was no 4G data. There was no public Wi-Fi. Out in the middle of Nevada, you didn't get any data anywhere. You printed out a sheet of paper and took that with you. So I probably had, 10 or 20 sheets of paper here all stapled together. And I had to do all of this at home before I left. I had to upload every waypoint into the GPS. I had to print out a sheet of paper for every geocache and then take that with me, and a week later go find them. So very cumbersome, but it was kind of fun. I was driving by there anyway, went by some petroglyphs in the middle of Nevada. This is Austin, Nevada. Then I found another one. This was one of these virtual caches. So this one was called the Center of Nevada cache. Person that set this up had the first point was at the 1962 hand surveyed center of Nevada. And this is what it looks like. It's in the basin and range. You've got the mountains around the outside, these big flat basins. Had to hike about a quarter mile from the truck out to the geocache. And from the first point, you have to go to this second point, which was midway between the 1962 hand-surveyed point, and then in 2003 they redetermined that point with satellite imagery. And then the third point, the end of the geocache, was the 2003 point. So I was there just a year after they had determined this point. And then I headed further east to Great Basin National Park. And there was another geocache out there. All along this road, there was a bunch of artwork that had been set up. And this one was called Who Waxed Mr. Ed? It was actually very well done. It's this old rusty car. If anyone knows what that type of car is, post up in the comment section down below. But somebody had gone in here and put together a horse skeleton sitting in the driver's seat of this old rusty car, and who waxed Mr. Ed? And there was nothing there. There was no ammo can. This is just one of these virtual caches that you just go out and find. From the road, you would just think this is an old rusty car, but somebody spent a lot of time putting this together, and it's pretty funny. It is in the middle of nowhere. That's looking east, the way I was headed. Unfortunately, that was the last geocache I found, because from this point on, I was headed to Minnesota. So I was in Nevada. Utah is off in the distance, and I was just kind of planning my route day by day, but I had no way of downloading any new geocaches here. And I went to Great Basin National Park. I'm sure there were hundreds of geocaches there. Went up some of the mountains to the north of Great Basin. There was probably geocaches up here. Here's Great Basin National Park, and I was off to the north, driving across the desert. I went through, here's some of the roads I took through Utah. This road wasn't even on my GPS map. I just drove down it just to see where it went. Great country out here, and I'm sure there's hundreds of geocaches, but I had no way of finding them. So in the back of my mind, I always wanted to have a way to find these things on the spur of the moment. And now that there's the geocaching app and smartphones with wireless data connections, probably out here you wouldn't get a connection, but you could at least go into the nearest town and download geocaches in this area. And so that's why I want to try to work this out on my bike, to figure out how to get access to all this information out here without having to drive 1,000 miles back home to get it, or on my bike, ride several hours to get the data. So that's what I'm trying to work out, all the details on how to do this, so that next time I'm out in country like this, I can go, hey, there's probably some geocaches. Where are they? And go out and find them. Yeah, I'd love to do another trip like this. I took a week of driving across the country. I went from California all the way to South Dakota on roads like this. I tried to avoid pavement as much as possible, and then when I hit South Dakota, I was running out of time and I had to get on the freeway. But I drove about 1,200, 1,500 miles on roads like this, picking my way day by day. If I'd find an interesting looking road, I would just drive down it and see where it went. I like doing this kind of stuff, and finding geocaches out in this sort of area is really neat, because you find all sorts of stuff out here. There's old abandoned water pumps and water tanks. Spectacular country, and it would be fun to go exploring out here looking for all these geocaches, but I had no way of finding them. And I didn't know I was going through this area before I left, so I didn't download all these locations at the time. These geocaches make a really neat way to explore this country, because people that are familiar with this area have placed those geocaches in interesting areas, and in areas that you wouldn't normally go to because you wouldn't think there was anything out there. But there's old cabins out there built into the cliffside. There's probably geocaches here, and I had no way of knowing that. So that's kind of my motivation, is I want to be able to get out and do this again. You've got to work out the technique close to home, and doing this on the bike up in the coastal mountains is a really good way to work out the details, because it's only 2.5 hours from home instead of 2.5 days of driving to get there. I got started doing it in the truck, and then I started trying to do it in the bike. So I had my bike GPS, and I still had the printouts. And now I want to try to do this all on the smartphone, and either using my GPS in the truck or the GPS on my bike and the smartphone instead of the paper, so that you can do these things on the fly. So that's the motivation. Hopefully that will help explain why I'm looking into doing this, because I like getting out in country like this. These geocaches are great motivation to get out here and explore off the road. Like, for instance, here, who would park their vehicle in the middle of this huge desert basin, and who would walk a 1/4 mile out to the middle of nowhere, unless you were looking for something like that, you know. So it's kind of a neat way to get you out of the vehicle instead of just driving down this washboard gravel road and cursing all the bumps and the dust. Hey, stop and spend a half hour out here walking through the desert, and you get a little exercise, you get a little experience navigating across the terrain, finding a location. And then here you had to find another location based on this one, and then you had to find a third location based on the second location. So you really practice your navigating skills, you get a little exercise, you see some country that you would never see before. That's kind of my motivation to figure out how to do this a little easier and do it more on spur of the moment so that you don't have to plan out weeks and weeks ahead of time. You can just sort of pick some stuff, get a data connection, download some points, and then keep going. So I wasn't able to do that 14 years ago. I had to pick locations ahead of time. I ran out of locations before I ran out of driving, and I really would like to get back and do some more of this. So if you've ever done any geocaching like that and have any tips, post up in the comment section below. Hopefully some year I'll get back out here and be able to repeat that trip and find a bunch of geocaches out there, because this is where I like to go out. You know, just spend weeks and weeks out here in the desert just finding these random locations. And these geocaches are a neat way to do that. Just get you out into the middle of nowhere. Who would ever think of hiking up to this grove of trees? But it was kind of neat up there. Really nice spot, good place for a lunch break. You get out of the sun, get in the shade of the trees. I think there was a little spring up here, if I remember right. And yeah, it was a really nice little place. So that's kind of how I geocache. I like finding these really remote areas to go to, and having the geocache as a destination gets you out here. Because otherwise you would just drive down this road at 40 miles an hour, and you would be cursing the bumps and the dust and how boring it is. Well, here you get to stop and get out and stretch your legs and go find something. So yeah, if you have any questions about that, post up in the comment section down below, and I'll put some more videos over here on the left side. And as always, thanks for watching.